Tonight is the big one, the fall. And yeah, it's going to be great. So last week we took a walk in the garden. We saw what life is like for the chimps right now in the Congo as we speak. And we experienced what life was like for humans living in small groups before language emerged. In the garden, everyone is cared for. Reality is alive to your presence. Everyone is fed, and no one is left behind. And the meal is where everyone comes together in the cool of the evening to commune. Now, tonight we're going to trace the emergence of the self, which springs to life in the full communion of the garden, but ultimately finds itself standing outside of the garden. And we'll fly through about 50,000 years of history, through language, agriculture, civilization, and writing, to see how the self-center emerges. Part 1, a shared world of images. So moving into language, the academic field's best guess at when language emerged lies between 135,000 BCE and full social use by 50,000 BCE. We know it was in place by at least 50,000 years ago because we see an explosion in symbolic artifacts and abstract thinking emerge in Europe at that time. The same kind of stuff can be found much earlier in several parts of the world. This wasn't specifically new, but around 50,000 years ago, it's everywhere. Cave paintings, carved figurines, bone flutes, tailored clothing, long-distance trade networks, elaborated burials, and specialized toolkits, appearing across multiple continents simultaneously. An explosion of images, technology, and expression. It's as if something that had been flickering for tens of thousands of years suddenly caught flame and took fire, and the humans found their voice. These things are the reason why we know anything about them at all. So let's imagine humans with fully operational language and symbolic capacity, potentially around 30 to 40,000 years ago. Now, last week we looked at this scene in the pre-language band. We've got a young man who's sick, and there's a woman in the band who's especially gifted and skilled at the healing arts. And let's imagine a specific plant comes to mind. Eucalyptus. I need eucalyptus. Now, this picturing eucalyptus wouldn't have been new. Many animals experience mental images. Maybe you've seen your dog dreaming. So this is not a new thing 40,000 years ago. But before language, she would have to go and find it herself. And even though she's the most skilled healer in the band, she has to leave the patient's side to go track down the herb that she needs to help him survive. And if his condition changes while she's gone, he's in less capable hands, but that's the only option. Once language immerses, you can say the word eucalyptus to a person, and as if by magic, the sound you made summons an image in the other person's mind. Two people have just entered the same invisible space through sound. With language, she can send someone else to get the needed plant. So while she attends to the sick young man, her brother can go find eucalyptus, potentially making the difference between life or death. Now, I want to slow this down so we can see just how revolutionary this is. The healer can enter a world of images in her mind. She can picture exactly what she wants. And through the use of a sound like eucalyptus, With language, she can send someone else to get the needed plant. She extends an invitation for her brother to enter her image world. This space is what language opens, a shared space where objects can exist that aren't physically there, but can be shared through images and taken back to the real world. Now, up to this point, living in the moment has been the default. Not a ritual, not a practice. It's just how experience occurs. Language is what opens the door to somewhere else. And we see an explosion in creativity and making. Now, this is an incredible gain for the emissary from our myth, the master and his emissary, the young man on the right. This is a truly exciting development for him. Remember that the master is the open attention that sees the whole picture, and the emissary is the focal mode of attention that only sees one thing at a time. You can feel how something like language doesn't help you let any more of the picture in. It's just kind of added on top. What language is good for is getting things done, the focal grasping mode. Look how quickly she got that done. Language doesn't give you any more information about the sky, but it can help you execute a complex goal extremely well. And we see some really cool things happen with language. The eldest woman tells stories about your grandfather at the fire. You've never met him, but when she speaks, the rhythm of her voice changes, and somehow his presence is felt. Your mother has a figurine that she touches every morning, not as a prayer, but a small acknowledgement. The figure is where felt presence gathers in this house. And the band that killed 4 of your warriors gets a name that won't be forgotten. And then we see something new emerge. Something radical is happening to the meal. 11,000 years ago, in what is now southeastern Turkey, hundreds, maybe thousands of people from across a region spanning 125 miles are converging on a limestone ridge, the way their parents did, and their grandparents before them. They walk for days, sometimes weeks, from across the region to reach this place. The site has been here for generations. Great stone circles open to the sky, each one an enclosure you can step down into, a space apart from the landscape, enclosed by pillars oriented to something. The circles have been built, used, and deliberately buried, and the new ones raised alongside. Layer upon layer, the ridge itself is made of what came before. Limestone pillars up to 18 feet tall, carved as beings, arms running down their sides, hands meeting at the front, faceless, still. 2 taller pillars stand in the center of each circle, facing each other. Across the surfaces of the pillars, foxes, snakes, scorpions, vultures, cranes, wild boar, all carved in relief into the stone. Some of the carvings are old and worn, some are sharp and new. And the people are feasting, wild game roasting over the open fires, gazelles, deer. The animal bone fragments from this site will number over 100,000. 7,000 grinding stones for processing wild grain. Stone troughs large enough to hold 150 liters of something like beer. People are eating, drinking, building, returning. For over 1,000 years, they come back. In the mobile world of the hunter-gatherer bands, Göbekli Tepe is the fixed center point, the place that doesn't move. 1,000 years later, some humans stopped moving around. In what is now central Turkey, one of the first large settled communities in the world, Catalhoyuk. Up to 8,000 people living in mud brick houses packed so tightly together, there are no streets. You enter through the roof, and the rooftops are where life happens. Children running across them, smoke rising from cooking fires below. This place will be occupied continuously for over 1,000 years. The fields surround the settlement. Wheat, barley, lentils are tended by the same families season after season. But they're still hunting too. Wild cattle, deer, boar. The land provides. Food is grown, hunted, stored, and prepared at the household level. Nobody is managing this at the group level. The image space that language has opened up is doing real work here, planning across seasons, remembering what worked last year. And the sacred has come indoors. The figure your mother used to carry in her things, she lives on the wall now. Bull horns mounted in plaster above the sleeping platform. Painted reliefs, leopards, handprints, geometric patterns. The sacred is not in a central temple or at a special gathering site. It's in your house. Your house is where you sleep, where you eat, where you bury your dead. Your grandmother is buried under the floor, right there, beneath where you dream. And for the first time, the meal happens inside a room. Your household hearth, your oven. Each house has its own. Your stored grain, your dried meat, your family. You climb down the ladder into your house and you eat there, and the figurine is on the wall, and your grandmother is under the floor. No palace, no administrative quarter, no chief's house larger than anyone else. Archaeologists spent 25 years excavating this site and could not identify a single building that served a centralized authority. 8,000 people, 1,000 years, agriculture, art, ritual, burial, and nobody in charge. The community is regulated without a central management system. And then it stopped working. In the most recent layers, after about 6,500 BCE, signs of inequality begin to emerge, and the site was eventually abandoned. The archaeologist who spent 25 years excavating this site noted that for many generations, it was very unacceptable for individual households to accumulate. Once they started to do so, more problems started to arise. Which leads us to part 2, superabundance. So in part 2, the plot thickens. The story that we've been building of life in the garden takes a turn. So up into this stage, I've been calling these different stages of development life in the garden. We have abundance, not superabundance, just old-fashioned abundance. And I'm defining that simply as everyone is fed. Life in the garden wasn't painless. Infant mortality, violence, seasonal hunger, and short life expectancy were real. But life in the garden was running on a foundation of an abundant, alive reality that provides for your needs. You wake up, you go on the hunt. You come back with what you need for today. Nobody is in charge of the group. Nobody is managing the economy. There's no boss, no president, no government. The best hunter leads the hunt and then merges back as a regular member of the group at dinner, not someone with a special status. The woman who takes lead on healing is simply the one with the gifts and the skills and the accumulated wisdom. She doesn't have a formal role. She's simply the natural person you go to when you're sick. Elders emerge naturally as the ones who know, the ones who have experienced the most droughts and know what to do when that happens. The same with the shaman, the earliest spiritual specialist we can identify in the record, going back at least 12,000 years ago. Someone in the band in whom a capacity emerges to enter a transformed state encounters the presences and the ancestors and returns with guidance for the community. It's not a job anyone assigns. It shows up in certain people, and the community recognizes it. The shaman serves the band, but doesn't govern it, is held by the community and not above it. So at the level of the social group, this abundance is a picture of the master at work in the healthy, balanced mode. The master and emissary myth tells us that once upon a time, there was a wise master that served a community and the community flourished. The default for the group is communion, and specialized emissary roles crystallize temporarily in service of the whole. When the task is completed, these emissaries drop their role and dissolve back into the whole. And the sacred is present because life is present. The forms we see the sacred take are what human life naturally expresses once the capacity for language emerges. And I want to pause here and just say that as someone who grew up in a theology drenched with St. Augustine's concept of original sin, this exploration of chimps and humans has been very healing and reviving for me personally. We are not born in sin. Our nature is not broken. Here we have a clear picture of human life in the garden. This is our nature. We don't have sin. We don't even have gods yet, let alone a monotheistic God or a Trinity God. What we do see is created beings having life and having it in abundance. And now back to superabundance. In southern Iraq, at the mouth of the Euphrates, around 5300 BCE, farmers are settling on a flat alluvial plain. The land is rich but dry. To farm here, you need irrigation. Canals dug collectively, water managed collectively. Recent excavations have mapped over 4,000 canals in the Eridu region from this period. Whereas at Catalhoyuk, the farming happened family by family, Eridu is the first time we see agriculture taking place through organized, coordinated labor at scale. You can't dig a canal alone. And Eridu will become the first settlement in the Sumerian civilization. Here is where the temple shrine emerges as a separate building. Whereas previously the statues and the figurines that carried presents lived in the home, in the earliest layer of Eridu, we find a simple mud brick room, barely larger than a hut. One room, a niche in the wall to hold a statue, an offering table, an ash pit where something was burned and scattered on the floor. And all these years later, they found lots and lots of fish bones around the floor. This is the first evidence we see of an offering, and we don't know who or what is on the receiving end. Likely some kind of felt presence associated with the water that makes everything possible, not yet a god. This is the first building we see dedicated to something other than living in it. The population grows from a village of dozens to a proto-urban center of 2,000 to 4,000. Irrigation creates surplus. Because you have more than you need, you have to manage it. Everything starts getting counted. At Catalhoyuk, each family stored their grains in their own home. Now that the group has procured over and above what they need, a temple institution emerges as the land-owning center. And for the first time, we see humans holding permanent roles as centralized administrators who organize the canal building, manage the grain stores, and pay laborers in crops. And so the emissary is higher at the level of society. The myth tells us that under the leadership of the wise master, the community flourished. It became more than the master could manage on his own. And so he appointed a trusted emissary to manage the details. Before, no one had permanent special roles. There were special roles, but they weren't permanent and they didn't define you within the community. Now there are permanent, specialized, centralized roles that affect everyone in the group. And most notably, these roles are living entirely in the image space, and they are increasing the gravity of the images in the life of the community. The temple owns the canal. You didn't build it alone, nobody could. But the temple organized the labor, and the temple manages the water. The temple advanced the seed grain at planting. The temple will collect a portion of your harvest when it comes in. If the harvest is good, the portion is paid and the account is clear. If the harvest is bad, the portion isn't paid and the debt doesn't disappear with the season. It carries over. It's still there next planting. You owe the temple, and the temple remembers. And Enki doesn't just receive offerings. Enki governs. He holds the divine powers that govern every aspect of civilization. Enki is the first Sumerian god. He holds law, craftsmanship, music, writing, medicine, justice. There are over 100 divine powers, and Enki controls them all. Civilization isn't invented by humans and then blessed by a god. It's a set of divine powers that Enki dispenses. The social order doesn't emerge from below. It descends from the god through the temple. And the priest doesn't pray to Enki and wait for an answer. The priest performs the incantation. Through ritual, the priest enters the god, assumes what the tradition calls the god form, and for the duration of the rite, speaks and acts with divine authority. He approaches as himself, a servant. He continues as the embodiment of the god. Decisions made in this state carry divine force. This is not a metaphor. The records treat this transformation as real. For nearly 2,000 years, the priest, the En, manages both the sacred and the civic. There's no separate political authority. The person who tends Enki in the morning is the same person who manages the canals in the afternoon. There's nothing to divide because it's all one function, channeling the god's governance into human community. The shaman's function, enter a transformed state, encounter the presence, bring back what the community needs, is now scaled up and institutionalized. And the offering is counted. Every measure of grain that comes in from the fields is recorded. Every portion set aside for Enki is tracked. Every animal sacrifice is logged. The offering is no longer a gesture, food placed alongside, the way you'd hand something to anyone at the fire. It's a line item. It has a quantity, a date, a source. The temple collects from the farmers, portions to the god, distributes to the workers, and accounts for the difference. What was once a meal is now a budget. What was once feeding a presence is now managing a revenue stream. The fish offering that someone once laid on a mud brick platform is now a full daily provision. Bread, beer, meat, fish, prepared by the temple staff, presented at scheduled times, and consumed by the priesthood on the god's behalf. Someone is sitting in a small room near the storehouse. Their entire day, every day, is spent doing something no human being has ever done before, tracking who owes what. Small clay tokens on a table, each one representing a quantity. That ball of clay is you. It sits on a shelf. It persists when you walk away. It is the first version of you that exists in the image space. Not your body, not your name spoken at the fire, but an abstract accounting of what you owe, stored in a form you don't control. And eventually, clay tokens turn into writing, and one of the marks means you. Not your face, not your story, not what your grandmother would say about you at the fire. A mark that means this person owes this much. The first self-identification in the image space is not a portrait or a prayer. It's a debt record. You show up in the human record for the first time because you owe the temple 10 measures of barley. But writing won't stay in the storehouse. You can't write a name with a picture of a sheep. A name is a sound, not an object. The accounting system gets broken open by the need to write names. And once writing can represent sound, it can represent anything. What pours through isn't more accounting. It's hymns, myths, ritual texts. And the person traditionally credited as the first named author in human history, Enheduanna, roughly 2285 BCE, a priestess, writing devotional poetry to the goddess Inanna. So the emissary builds a tool for counting sheep, the sacred breaks back in and transforms it, and the first person to pick it up and say I with it is a woman praying. And then the city outgrows the priest. Uruk, the first true city in the world, swells to over 2 square miles, 100,000 people. The job of governing both the god's estate and the human community is too much for one person. A new figure appears in the art around 3300 BCE. Scholars call him the priest king, bearded, wearing a distinctive net skirt, shown feeding the sacred flocks, leading rituals, and overseeing construction. His title is still En, meaning Lord. His model is the shepherd, the one who tends the flock, who serves the animals in his care. He governs by tending, not by commanding. The role is splitting, sacred function and civic function starting to differentiate. But one person is still doing both. And then the split completes. By roughly 2900 BCE, a new title appears. Lugal, literally great man, the king, a military leader elevated to permanent authority through battlefield success. Now there are 2 heads of the household. The priest manages the god's estate and the sacred calendar. The king manages defense, diplomacy, and justice. The king's legitimacy still flows from the gods. Kingship descended from heaven. And the king who neglects the temple loses his mandate. But the king is not the priest. He's a new kind of figure, one whose authority is grounded in military power and personal charisma, sanctioned by divine appointment, but attached to a man, not a shrine. The priest's authority dissolves back into the temple when the priest dies. It's the god's authority passing through a body. The king's authority is personal. It accumulates. It passes to sons. The Lugal is the first permanent, heritable, personally held authority in human history. The first role where the emissary doesn't return power when the task is done. And the god is present through the statue. This is not a metaphor. Before a statue can function, the priests perform the mouth washing. They wash its mouth, Open it so it can breathe and see and eat. They throw the sculptor's tools into the river and have the craftsmen swear an oath that the gods, not their hands, made it. The manufacture is ritually erased so the presence can be real. Once the mouth is opened, the god is there, seeing through the statue's eyes, breathing through its mouth, eating the food placed before it. The statue is not a symbol of God. It is where the God lives on earth. The daily service, the washing, the clothing, the feeding, the hymn, is tending a living being. The priest who listens in the shrine each morning is listening through the statue. The statue is the focal point through which God's governance flows into the human community. And everyone knows it in the ancient world. When the king of Elam conquers Babylon in 1158 BCE, he doesn't just burn the city. He takes the statue of Marduk and carries it home to Elam. This is not looting a treasure. This is the literal abduction of Babylon's god. Without the statue, the daily service stops. The Akitu festival cannot be performed. The coronation of the king is impossible. The channel is dead. A Mesopotamian text describes what follows when the god is gone. People's corpses block the gates. Brother eats brother. Friend strikes friend with a mace. The scepter grows short. Evil lies across the land. Dogs go mad and bite people. So military defeat and divine abandonment are the same event described from two angles. There are people now whose full-time job is the image space. Scribes, accountants, administrators, sitting with the clay from morning to night. And there are people now whose full-time job is authority, the king and his court, governing not through divine embodiment, but through command, strategy, and force. The emissary has been hired twice, once as an institution in the temple, once as a person in the king. The self is crystallizing around both, in the scribe who lives in the ledger all day and in the king who carries permanent personal power that doesn't dissolve back into the community. They are the first humans who live in the image space full time. The first humans for whom the focal mode is not a tool you pick up and put back down. It is who they are. And in the literary record, which now stretches across centuries and multiple civilizations, something becomes visible in the texts themselves. The earliest Sumerian royal inscriptions don't say, "I built this temple." They say, "Ningirusu spoke to Gudea, and the temple was built." The king acts because the god commands. The verbs of initiative belong to the gods. The human is the instrument, faithfully, respectfully executing what was received. The Gudea cylinders, which contain cuneiform script, tell us that Gudea doesn't decide to build. He doesn't deliberate. He doesn't weigh options. Ningirusu appears, shows the plan, and Gudea builds what he was shown. The self that would need to decide is simply not in the text. What is in the text is a man who receives and acts. Now cross to Egypt, the Old Kingdom, the age of the Great Pyramids. For centuries, the only voice in the inscriptions is the king's, and even the king speaks as Horus, as the living God on earth. The officials who serve him describe themselves in terms of their function, their title, their relationship to the king. Not, "I am a man of strong opinions," but rather, "the overseer of the granary, servant of the king." Identity is positional. You are your role. And then around 2181 BCE, the Old Kingdom collapses. Drought, fragmentation, the central authority that held everything together breaks apart. And In the literature that emerges from the rubble, something new appears. Not the servant of the king performed his duties, but I gave bread to the hungry. I clothed the naked. I ferried the stranded across the river. I did this. I am this. First person, personal claim, individual credit for individual action. The I is loose in the text for the first time. And then, from the 12th dynasty, around 1900 BCE, a text that stops you cold. A man is arguing with his Ba. The Ba is the mobile aspect of the soul in Egyptian thought, the part that can travel, that has its own perspective, that embodies individuality. And in this text, the man and his Ba disagree. The man is tired of living. He's attracted by death. Death, he says, is like the smell of myrrh, like sitting under a sail on a breezy day, like a man coming home after years of war. He longs for it. His Ba argues back, pushes back, tells him to stop complaining, to enjoy what life offers, that the afterlife isn't what he thinks it is. Stop and feel what this requires. Two voices inside one person, disagreeing. One wants to live, one wants to die, and neither can resolve the argument because they are both in him and they don't agree. This is not a man hearing a God and obeying. This is not a prophet receiving instruction from an external source. This is a self watching itself suffer and splitting into two positions on its own suffering and generating a dialogue between those positions. The eldest woman telling stories at the fire, this would have made no sense to her for two reasons. It wouldn't have made sense because obviously life is worth living. The world is alive, full of presence, inherently meaningful. And it couldn't have made sense to her because the very question, is life worth living, requires a spectator who stands outside of life and evaluates it. It requires someone who can hold their own existence as an object in the image space, turn it over, examine it from different angles, and decide whether it's worth continuing. That is a self, a fully operational self, and it is an agony. Part 3, the Bronze Age collapse. So we'll fast forward to 1250 BCE, just 3,000 years ago. The Eastern Mediterranean is a web of kingdoms bound by trade, diplomacy, and mutual interdependence. Egyptian gold flows north, Cypriot copper flows south, tin from as far as Afghanistan. Kings write to each other in Akkadian and address each other as my brother. They negotiate marriages, ask after each other's health, jokingly complain about the quality of the gifts. The world feels permanent. The sacred calendar is what the civilization is for. At Karnak, the priest walks the corridor before dawn, breaks the seal, washes the god, clothes the god, places the morning meal, speaks the hymn. Every morning, generation after generation. At the Akitu, the god statue is carried through the streets. 12 days of feasting, music, procession. The king is stripped and made to kneel, showing devotion to the gods. Harps are decorated with gold, hymns are sung. This is not a society that does religion on the side. The entire civilization is organized around maintaining the relationship between the human community and the gods who govern it. At Mari, a prophet enters a trance, and a goddess speaks in the first person. Zimrilim, you will be tested in a revolt. Protect yourself. The gods speak consistently across every civilization that has left us records, and the statues are the focal points through which that flows. mouths washed, eyes opened, fed every morning. And within 50 years, it all falls apart. This is my worst nightmare. Earthquakes, drought, harvests fail, trade networks seize, the sea peoples arrive, who are displaced populations. They burn coastal cities one after another. Internal revolts, each crisis feeding the next. The city of Ugarit is destroyed and never rebuilt. The Hittite Empire collapsed so completely that it was lost to history and thought to be a myth until it was discovered in the 1800s. Mycenaean Greece, palaces destroyed, writing disappeared. 3 centuries of darkness, and Egypt survived, but barely. Now put yourself inside it. You are a priest. You've walked this corridor every morning for 17 years. You break the seal, you wash the god, you place the meal, you listen. And in the listening, something has always come. Not every morning, but often enough that your life is built around this practice, the way a riverbed is built around water. And now the temple is burning. You reach the innermost shrine and the statue is gone, carried off. The niche is empty. You stand in the silence. You have never made a decision through internal reasoning the way modern people make decisions. You have always received them. And it's not just your temple, it's everywhere. The entire Mediterranean world is gone. Before, communion with God was the default. Then it became managed by institutions of incredible scale and complexity. And now it is gone. Without the sacred ritual technology regulating the connection with the gods, the master is gone, and the emissary is left standing alone. Not because the emissary seized control and stole power from the master, but because he was abandoned, left standing alone. The image world is still running. The images are still there, but there is no one on the other end. The priest stands in the empty shrine, and the image world keeps generating plans, worries, calculations, memories, but the ground underneath it is gone. The statue is gone. The channel is closed. The images have lost their anchor in the real. And what had been one man's agony in Egypt becomes everyone's condition. Within 2 generations, the spectator is universal, aimed at one thing: survival. Everyone has an interior narrator. Everyone is watching themselves from the inside. The image world, no longer organized around the divine, around the daily service, the festival, the God who speaks, reorganizes around the only thing left in the room: you. And when the scribes compile the book of Genesis in roughly the 6th century BCE, they are writing down a story inherited from people who lived through the original loss, handed down through oral tradition across 600 years. And the story says, "I heard the sound of you in the garden. I was afraid because I was naked, and I hid." Distance, fear, shame, hiding, our image of self-consciousness and the outcome of the fall. Next week, we'll dive headlong into the scripture, walking through the Old Testament and watching what happens when the God stops speaking and humanity lives permanently in exile. Well, hopefully that was really fun to put together. It was a lot of research, and there's like so much more, but it is just so cool to me to see the picture of where the Bible comes from and how we evolved to be where the Bible starts and picks up.